Hello everyone, I'm Coach Agnan and you're watching Athlete Support. Today's special guest is Harry Saner. Harry is a fencer and an Olympian. Hi Harry, how are you?
Good, how are you doing, Ag?
Excellent. Harry, I want to start you with the Olympics. We did an interview before you went to the Olympics. That was just about months before we left. And then we had a whole lot of experiences there, and I want to dig into that. And before we start with the actual fencing experiences, I want to take you to the environment, the Olympic Village, and the experiences that you encountered there where we prepare for fencing, where mentally, physically, skill, everything is up the level. And then we have this experience where the environment is environment where you can't control the elements. And can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So let me start maybe from the absolute beginning. And I'd qualified April last year, April 27th, our Freedom Day, which was very auspicious. And from that point, obviously knowing I'd qualified, dealing with all the paperwork, I'd been continuing to train as hard as I could. And once everything was sorted, we got on the plane. We had a good general idea of who I was going to fence, and so we started. We, being my coach and I, we started, choosing strategies to be like, okay, cool, we can focus on this or that. Look at this distance and choose that action essentially. And then once we got to the village, or maybe start with the flight. Once we did the flight, we got there, had to wait and get our accreditation, and I mean, like, I just remember there was a permanent smile on my face. It was amazing to be there, and like, yes, the flight was long and everybody was sweaty and uncomfortable, and it was just like, wow, like seeing the Paris banners and the volunteers, and everything at that point was viewed with rose-tinted goggles, as they should have been. And so once we got to the village, went through all the security checks, and there was like a bus to take you and your bags to wherever you needed to go. I sort of checked in, got everything down, met my roommate who was sleeping, and Wian Roux was his name. He was our Olympic archer, which was really cool. So they put the swordsman and the archer together. That was quite key. And so I got there a week before my event. And normally the week before you kind of just relax. So it was a little bit annoying that I was in the Olympic Village. We had all these awesome facilities and people and everything I needed. And my key job was to relax because, you've done the work before, or I'd done the work before. And my sole focus was to perform as best as I could on that day. In terms of the things that I found a little bit annoying was not everything was super convenient in terms of I kind of wanted to just sit in bed and pop to the fridge and come back, but you had to pop to the mess hall, which was a few hundred meters rather than a few meters. And then also adjusting to the weather and the temperature and the humidity. Those are small things that you normally I'm used to, but I think a week before I was probably just maybe not too worked up or too worked down. It was just I'd processed too many things, because the village, there's everything on offer. You can have as much food as you want, and there's a bunch of cool little video game areas and a place to watch all the different sports and places to interact with people. And I think that was probably actually too much stimulation, which is what a lot of first-time Olympians deal with. And so leading up to the event, doing everything I could, preparing as I could to go. Luckily, our training venue was really nearby, and in a really well, or just beautifully laid out warehouse with drinks and volunteers to watch. But we couldn't really make the best of that space. I just had a few lessons and maybe a few bouts. Just to not, tire out the nervous system or whatever. And despite that, I think it was a weird sort of feeling. I wasn't super stressed. In fact, I was I'm super happy just to be here and to know that I'm ready and that all I have to focus on is how I'm going to fence. And I wasn't over stressing. But I think at some point I got to a feeling where I'd had so much anticipation that I had lost it and the adrenaline kind of left me. And so I was trying to get that back.
The balance of it.
Yeah, and fencing very well, but it wasn't as, I didn't feel as powerful and as strong and as focused as maybe I would have wanted, especially on the Olympic stage. And
sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
so it's
please go ahead.
It's almost like you have this neural stimuli where you just all hyped up because you're arriving there, your first time Olympian. The city, even though you've been to Paris before, it's the first time seeing it through the eyes of an Olympian who's come there with a purpose. Then you have the Olympic Village experience, which is almost a sensory overload. And the body and the mind is processing all of that. And at the same time, you're reaching the point where you're just going, you reach the cap and you go poof, and
Yes.
you're feeling almost down. It's a downer. And that's the balance part that I'm understanding that you're
That's what it felt
battling with.
Yeah, the main thing I think for me was like, I'd checked off everything I needed to do, and I think that's common for athletes to do. It's like, oh look, I need to make sure I train, make sure I eat okay, and make sure I rest. And then what not to do is also as important, and I think I should have focused on that in the sense of like not letting other things at the village distract me, such as like going and looking at all the different stuff, and like the Samsung area and the gaming area and stuff. I probably should have just slept more than I did. But yeah, I don't think I managed it badly, but it's definitely things to learn to make sure that these small things are considered and are either dealt with or just completely ignored so that you can be in the best space possible. And there was a few like laughable things happen. I mean, the night before my competition at like 10 p.m., someone knocks at our door and is like, hey, you guys need towels? And it's like, I'm waking up at 5 to go do my Olympic event. It's a little like, you're a little early or like a little late, in fact. So it's just like small things like that. I don't think...
Was that a management person or just an athlete?
I think it was... It wasn't an athlete. I don't know how the structure of like the hospitality thing was run in the village, but it was a janitor or someone who had been sent to like replace towels and things. It's just like, I don't know why. Yeah, it's odd that it was happening at 10 p.m. and not 10 a.m. But like, yeah, I don't think... I didn't want things like that to matter, but I think considering them and being able to just be like, okay, yes, there's a bunch of annoying things that would work me up a little. Let's view them, let's look at them, let's take them apart, and just let them go away, and so I can focus my event.
I think at one point you sent me a message, Og, the mattress, the bed is so bad, I'm getting a backache.
Yeah,
those are the kind of things that do contribute to it's physically your well-being. It's not just mentally that you're not getting the proper sleep, but tomorrow you're waking up sore back and you're going like, oh, now I have to compete. Again, this is something that all athletes had to deal with, and I think that's something that the management, the organizers, that is, of the Olympics had to take in account. Like the performance of the athletes is very much tied together with you being able to have a good night's sleep and reach a good performing level the day of competition. So those are the kind of things that I took note, and I thought, that's something that they could have handled a little bit better. I think what I would add to that, you mentioned there were some noises and parties, and that's something that I felt that there could have been a little bit of a better consideration and organizing, taking in account that you're going to put a whole lot of athletes together, and maybe these athletes are competing 2 weeks from this point, and you competing the next day, and you know it's a little bit of a difficult situation, in my opinion.
I think stuff like that could become a logistical nightmare. At the same time, I absolutely think it should be taken into account because everyone's there for a different sport at a different time, and they all have different training schedules. So meanwhile, like while you're in bed at 9 or 8 or 7, there are people who are still training till 11 because their thing's a few weeks away, and or they need to prepare for a late night event or late night final, that sort of stuff. And yeah, it is kind of annoying when you're trying to go to sleep and there's a group of homies just walking around and having fun at the Olympic Village, which is like absolutely, I would also love to like walk around with my friends and just have a good time. But like you're at the Olympics, you need to kind of focus. Yeah.
I think in a nutshell, as the idea with the Olympic Village was really a good idea, it's not possible logistically to make things good for all the athletes for the named reasons. one thing that they did get right, at least from your perspective, is the food was really good. And I did ask you questions on that. You think your opinion on it was that food was wholesome, it was nutritious, it was tasty. So that's one thing that they, and when I heard that as a coach, I was like, okay, that's a really important thing, and thumbs up for that.
And funny enough, I mean, the experiences for everyone was different. So like my mattress wasn't so super great, but other people's were. And dealing with that, there was like a little place in the village where you could go and either exchange or check out like what your optimum mattress orientation was, because they had these like foam blocks essentially, like made out of plastic, that were softer on one side than the other, and so they had different hardnesses that you could optimize for yourself. And similarly for the food, I was completely content with all the food, and also I avoided the late night rush where everybody was coming back from whatever training venue they were at, and there wasn't enough influx of food to take care of all the athletes. I heard that was quite a problem. Also, like, just not enough big cuts of meat. Meanwhile, like, I don't normally have a lot of, well, I mean, I do have a lot of meat sometimes, but my focus is carbohydrates because I'm doing endurance and power. So luckily I had a good experience with the food, and like the French food was excellent. I mean, like croissants and salmon for breakfast, you can't beat that anywhere in the world, let alone France.
I'm having a bit of a giggle because the first couple of days, it was, from my perspective, croissants.
Yeah.
And after second, third day, I don't know, I was going, oh,
yeah. No, you do
like I can't handle this. Days. It's like you love the food, but that's not how I live. My diet is very clean. That was my concern for a lot of athletes there, going like how much of a redirection from their normal diet and nutritious supplementing food, and how well do they eat. So if you have an athlete who really eats clean, if they end up eating croissants every day, it's not going to be
but
good.
Luckily at the village they did have salad bars everywhere, and there was a variety of food to choose from. So obviously I didn't like have it every day, but I did allow myself the variety I normally have at home. And obviously, like, they aren't exactly the home foods you would normally eat, but I was more than happy with
good
what
for
was
the
available.
endorphins.
Yes, indeed.
It makes you happy. So tell us on a day of competition, the mindset. When you're entering it's a big audience, Grand Palais. It's so many people. It's a little bit. It's an extreme experience. I don't think anything really prepares you for Olympics and the crowds and the noise. And so, what was your mindset entering Grand Palais, absorbing the audience, the noise, and staying composed and on ball?
Well, let me begin my Grand Palais experience the day before, because I had to do weapons check for fencing. You have to check all your equipment and make sure it all works, it's all within standard. And again, the small things came into play where, like, there was something wrong with my flags, because we had gotten a badge like this for the
Olympic, the National Olympic.
Yes, and we had gotten that for our fencing kit, so we could have the badge on the side as well as our...
Is that a sticker one?
Yeah, or sewn on. And we also normally have flags on our legs, and that's just a normal indication of your country and your whatever. But there was a bit of a confusion where we had asked for this badge or whatever we needed, but this had replaced this artwork. And so the only valid artwork was the one on my shoulder, not the one on my legs, which was obviously annoying. I wanted my South African flags to be there for everyone to see. Luckily, that didn't become much of an issue. We kind of just put more badges on top, and it was considered okay. Just to save on time and stuff. And then, before that and during the weapons check, I was absolutely ecstatic, because we could just walk around the Grand Palais and look at everything, and to see everything being set up and the beautiful structures, and it was just absolutely stunning. And maybe not the lights and the full show was there yet, but it was still nice to be able to take in the space a little bit.
Talking about the lights, was there any difference in the lighting the night before when you were doing the weapons check and on the day of competition?
I think so. I think they did like the showy lights when everybody was walking in, and then the normal lighting was as it was the day before. It was just obviously a completely different atmosphere as compared, like, you have a few athletes walking around doing their weapons check and a few other people to help, versus 8,000 people, full stands, talking, and there's a big roar. So once we'd done weapons check, I had to like go wait for the bus. That bus didn't come. I had to go wait for another bus, and like eventually got back at like 2 or 3 or 4 p.m. I can't even remember. But yeah, it was like a long bus ride, and those things I think do accumulate. And so again, like that's why we spoke about that earlier. Just it's something to consider and make sure to manage yourself with, especially for bigger events where they don't take as much care to athletes as you would be able to take care of yourself in smaller events. But then arriving, I'd gone to bed, woken up early, got to the bus, everything was laid out and ready to go, and I was like headphones on and cruising. Walked in. I can't remember clearly how it happened, but I got ready, warmed up, stretched, had a lesson with my coach. I fenced with Nicholas Zhang from Canada, because we were kind of like on opposite ends of the table, so theoretically we would meet in the final only, but we were both lost in the first round, which is quite sad. But so preparing for my fight was good. I was feeling on it, feeling pretty decent with my moves, my actions, and my choices, and my distance. And then walking in, there was like the initial training area, a secondary training area, and then the final like check and into the
main hall,
the fighting area.
The fighting
area. Yeah, and even that had 2 stages. So it was like beginning area, next warm-up area, checking stage. Okay, everybody get together. You go to the next stage, which was on the same floor as where you would fence, after like winding through the back paths of the Grand Palais, and then walking out. And walking out was amazing because we had been like, I'd try to manage myself by getting a bit more, just get a bit more excited, a bit more focused. I was stretching while we were meant to be like sitting and waiting in the little cubicle that was there for us. And we walked out, and you can literally see me on the camera. Like I just look up at this beautiful structure of the Grand Palais, and I was trying to take in everything and like really be present in the moment. And it was awesome. And I walked out, we had like saluted the crowd and everything, and those 8,000 people was the best and the biggest crowd that fencing's ever had. I think it's the #1 biggest stadium that's ever been given to fencing, and so it was awesome to be able to fence inside that crowd. And like, interestingly for me, the crowd noise didn't really throw me off. What threw me off was how I thought about my screams. When I was fencing, and you scream after a point just to release energy and like also just get you more amped. It didn't reflect back because it was such a big space, and so I thought I was screaming less loud than I normally do. But obviously that wasn't the case. It still sounded pretty good when I watched it afterwards. And what was really heartwarming was before I started the bout, I like looked up into the stands and saw my family with their flags and stuff, and I just smiled and I saluted them. And I suppose I was a bit like pensive before going on. Obviously, like trying to be serious, trying to be focused, and I was really happy with how I began the bout because I was moving, I was staying out of distance, and I won the first point. We had a few exchanges where I managed to keep it quite close with my opponent, Vadim Sharlaimov from Kazakhstan. I'd fenced him before, so I did know a few of the things he was doing, and obviously we'd been looking at what we could do against it, but I just couldn't make the right distance to do what we had decided to do, which was like run away from his big attacks and then close the distance to like punish him for doing really long attacks. I didn't. That second part I just couldn't get to because he would recover, or I was too like worried to fully commit because he had a really good parry. So at the beginning, keeping it quite close. In the middle, I'd lost 1 or 2 points, and so he was ahead, and so I had to apply a bit more pressure, and that wasn't so great because he could just hit together with me, and we'd both get points, and he would get closer to the final score, whereas I had to like make that and then come back. So we had gone to the third round, and it was like, I don't even remember the score, but I only had 2 points to win, whereas I had like 5 or 6.
Yeah, but there was a point where you like neck to neck, and then it started to make a little bit. Neck to neck,
he got a little bit ahead. I had to push. He got a little bit further ahead. We kept score together, and then like I got one, and he finished the bout. It's brutal. That was the reality for I think 17 out of 35 of the people there who would in their first match lose, and like that's just fencing, which is quite. I think it was 19 people that went out in their first round.
So there were 19 athletes that went out in the first round. if you could do something to win the match, something that you didn't, a different approach, what would have that been? What would you, in hindsight, looking at the bout and you've analyzed it, what would you have done differently?
The thing that sticks in my thinking of the match was I was trying to break the distance and be quite far, but what could have been more beneficial, although more risky, would be to be closer. And because I think he was about a head taller than me and had just more range than I did, it would have been better had I crashed the distance every time and maybe made smaller adjustments rather than breaking the distance every time and trying to then make it up again, if that makes sense.
Maybe force him to react in a way that he's not calculating, it's forcing his hand, maybe.
Yeah, I would say maybe, but maybe not just be more reactive, but lower his options. Because if I'm close, you kind of both have to extend your arm at the same time, so you either both hit or you break the distance to try and bait them into something. But yeah, it's a tricky one. Even if I had done that, fencing's about changing and improvising and adapting, and that also could have ended completely differently. There were a few points that I was happy with that I had gone in close and won them, but they weren't certain. It wasn't clean. It wasn't like, oh yeah, that'll definitely work again. It was like, oh, that was close, which I think is the nature of most fencing matches. A lot of points end up like that unless you completely have your opponent's number, which is not often.
I want to ask you this. All right, so, and this is very different from what I'm going to mention now. When you sit at home and you watch Olympics,
yeah,
you have one mindset. But now you're in the Olympics, you had a bout, you competed, and how different is the mindset of a now Olympian? You had that bout, and you're watching the Olympics, the rest of the Olympics,
yeah.
And what are you learning at this point versus someone who hasn't had an opportunity to be at the Olympics and had that experience? So there is a profound mindset change between one and the other.
Yeah, I would say the first thing is clarity. I mean, having had the experience, you have a better idea of what it looks like behind the scenes. For example, if you're just watching on TV, you're getting a side view of the two fences, and you can't really pick up on the nuances that you would be able to pick up on if you were there. And so I think just for myself, for going forward and trying to learn from watching my matches, I have to really work hard to override that like third person perspective and try and put myself into the shoes of myself in the video to be like, oh, what did this look like? How would this look if I had changed this? And even putting yourself into the shoes of your opponent to see what you would look like to them. And I think like, training in front of a mirror and or similar things could work like that. But mental wise, it's night and day. I mean, when you're sitting at home watching versus being there, I mean, I remember coming back after I'd qualified and I'd watched myself win on camera. I was like, that's not me. It doesn't feel like me. Even though I'd done those things, I'd been through that experience and it was just amazing. And a complete just release of energy. Like on the video, you can see me just scream until my voice breaks 3 or 4 times. And I just kept screaming. And just that, I think that encapsulates what it feels like to qualify for the Olympics for the first time. And you don't get that sense even when you watch yourself. Even when you try and remember what it's like, it's completely different to when you go through it the first time.
You said something that's very interesting to me. You almost have this detached feeling watching yourself at this grand environment, and you're going like, well, I've lived through that, but it doesn't feel real for myself. Why do you think that is? Why do you not have that connection? Do you feel like you cannot connect to what you were feeling and experiencing, or is just you're not tapping into that? For what reason?
I'm not sure. I think it would be more along the lines of I'm not tapping into it. But I know, for example, like the way it's filmed, looking at yourself being filmed does not take in the whole atmosphere of being there with everyone. And it's literally a completely different perspective from the camera view versus your own view. And I think that's just my own problem, not being able to latch onto those things. Or I think I can, but it just takes more time for me to try and remember those, to be like, okay, this is what it felt like, this is why I made those decisions, maybe I should have tried this if I wanted to improve that, etc. But yeah, I don't know, I'd love to know. I'm sure there's some neuroscience behind it. That
well,
we should
meditation and
investigate.
breathing exercises do help the person to immerse themselves, watching themselves on a screen and feel what they were feeling at the time and tap into that. I think it is important because it creates that emotional link, and it creates the action towards what you were doing in that bout, at that competition, which I do believe it's important component to producing good results. And there is obviously there is science behind that. One thing that I like to know, once you've finished, so you're now done, your next day you're sitting as an audience member, obviously, and you're watching, and your big prize was wanting to compete against Yannick Borel. That was something we were talking about, not to take away from Vadim. He's an excellent fencer. This is not like now saying like someone is lesser, but our practice was going towards ultimately competing against Yannick Borel. And then you watched Yannick and Vadim compete. What's going through your mind? And do you see yourself standing there instead of Vadim and going like, no, you should have done this, you should have done that? Do you have that connection and those thoughts? What's going through your mind at that time?
Yeah, let me answer this and then we can go back to the meditation stuff.
Yes.
Because I also wanted to say some things there. Absolutely. I mean, I was watching that match from the get-go once I had left my like area and gotten my tracksuit on and joined my parents. And it was really cool. And obviously with a track record like Yannick Borel's, he just has an insane track record. Also, he's a Frenchman in Paris for the Paris Olympics. I think the hype around fencing him would have been amazing. Beating him would have been even more amazing. Or I would have been like, stuff would have been thrown at me from the French crowd, I'm sure. But
they did have loud, sorry to interrupt you, like a vuvuzela type. I think they were vuvuzelas.
Yeah, they had like little trumpets.
And I kept turning and going like, wow, that's like really disturbing.
No, every time a Frenchman scored, the whole stadium erupted and like just smashed their feet on the metal stands, and like there was the atmosphere, and then it was completely elevated when a Frenchman scored. And the match between Vadim and Yannick was excellent because they were both really close all the way. I think the final score was 15-13 to Yannick.
Something like that. It was like 2 or 3 points difference.
Yes.
If I remember.
And I think it was really well managed. I wouldn't have tried to put myself being like, oh, if he did this, I would have done that. Just because there's complete different styles to the way they fence compared to how I fence, and just like the shapes and sizes of like how deep their lunges or flashes are, or all that stuff is different. And so I think the feeling of watching me fence Yannick, in my mind at least, would have been completely different to how I was experiencing watching Vadim and Yannick fence. I mean, I think it was just an excellent bout. I don't know. I don't even remember what I enjoyed about it. I just remember that it was great.
So you say we're very different, just specifically for the audiences, and I'm very curious about this myself. Yeah. Let's say there is a point where 2 of them are squaring off, and Vadim commits to an attack, and you think, well, I wouldn't do that, but he ends up scoring.
Yeah.
Do you learn something from that, and you go like, oh, that took me by surprise?
Yeah, I think so. And in the same breath, it's like, oh, but I wouldn't have been in that distance and to choose that time, because it would have been different for me because I have shorter arms, shorter legs, or I would have needed to be closer, or that kind of thinking. But it still would have been like, oh, that was a cool move, or like, oh wow, like I see how he baited him into that because he usually does this, and so we have to go there. But yeah, maybe we should do a full review of like, hey, look, I was there, I watched this. What are they doing? Yeah,
you obviously, Yannick and Vadim are very tall, both of them. They're about the same height. I think maybe Kazakh is
6 centimeters, and I'm 184, so they're like taller than me.
So yeah, obviously it will work differently from their perspective. And what did you learn from their bout? What was the biggest message you took from their bout?
I don't know. Let me think about that. It was weird. It felt like watching two giants clash because they are just massive men, and the speed and power with which they did everything was still stunning. I don't think at the time I would have had the same amount, especially because of what we talked about earlier, where I felt a little like my adrenaline had been dumped. But knowing that that's possible to get to and possible to exceed, I think is very inspiring as much as it is daunting. And yeah, knowing that just watching the bouts throughout the whole day and into the finals, the man who won was Kano Koki from Japan, and he's shorter than I am, and he beat Yannick Borel. And so stuff like that was also oh wow, size, height, weight doesn't matter in fencing. It's
Absolutely.
about action choice, timing, distance,
agility. Because he's got Koki's got an incredible agility to him, and that's one of the components that's the winning card for his side. And I was about to mention him just now. Was that win a surprise to you? What were your thoughts before the bout?
Technically, in fencing, nothing's really surprising. I mean, there could have been a few more upsets, but I don't know if I wasn't personally surprised. I was just amazed as to the level of fencing that they were doing. And going back to the Vadim and Yannick bout, just watching them patiently eke it out, knowing that they were waiting for the right time to do what they needed to do to try and score, while they have such strength and power and ferocity behind them, is a really interesting thing that I took away in terms of patience. And one of my weaknesses sometimes is I feel that I rush too much because I just want to dominate my opponent. But in a sport like fencing or martial art, that often leads to your timing's off, your distance is off, and so you're not making the right decision in the right time, and you just get punished for that. And I mean, watching the fencing throughout the day, it's really interesting to see that everyone has a different style, a different amount of agility and timing differences that they all mix and match to make work for themselves.
Now, taking that experience in account, and obviously we're working towards the next Olympics in LA, what is the biggest lesson that you've taken out of the Olympic experience that you can apply towards qualifying for the next Olympics?
So what I've implemented is just knowing that I can train more and that I'm not going to just break, even though it's difficult. I've read a couple books that also changed my mind since the Olympics, and so I think I'm actually training more than I was before and for the Olympics. And I've also managed to get my training partners to train with me more often, which I think was obviously a key part in improving. But from the Olympics itself is knowing that there are a wide variety of athletes at different skill levels for every single sport. And I didn't notice it at the time, but I had these undercurrents in my mind of that I'm a lower tier athlete and I'm not good enough, and all those sort of doubtful things that I didn't really realize absolutely impacted how I did things before.
What makes it a lower tier athlete? What is in your mind a lower tier?
I mean, looking at let's take basketball for example. If you have an NBA all-star team who is getting paid millions of dollars show up at the Olympics, you kind of expect them to win gold or at least podium. Whereas if I'm just okay, first of all, fencing isn't known for being paid, isn't world renowned or whatever, and I'm not getting paid millions of dollars to be an athlete. In fact, I'm not getting paid anything to be an athlete. It's a different ball game, literally. You have to play your cards differently, and maybe there's a few more things that we could unpack in terms of why I feel like that, or maybe I'm just lamenting not having the same level of whatever it is that's there.
Well, let's speak about specifics. I was at one point looking at the table of top 20 competitors in fencing. I was actually looking with your mom, and we were going through the competitions that top 20 attend, and there are about 10 top international competitions that those top 20 attend year round. and it does make a difference. So maybe I think the attention should be on the exposure towards those top 10 international competitions.
Absolutely. Yes, experience and the effort of going there are completely important. It's just difficult for a lot of people to get the right funding and timing, and and trying to train while having a job and doing everything that you can to try and fund your fencing, if that makes sense.
So let's put it this way. How many of those top 10 competitions do you attend?
I mean, like over the span of my career, maybe like 1 or 2 a year instead of, the full range
10.
of 10. Ideally, it's all 10, and then it's, I think, zonal championships and world championships. But yeah, in general, it's like 1 or 2, and it's because they're on the same flight path. And it's normally Doha and Heidenheim, because you can fly to Heidenheim and then come back via Doha and then back to South Africa.
So one could apply a simpleton logic and say, despite the fact that you don't compete 10 top competitions, international competitions per year, you do 1 or 2,
Yeah.
you still qualified for the Olympics, and you still showed very good spirit, competitive spirit, competing at the Olympics. And when you level that off against the fact that you don't have that opportunity like the top 20,
Yeah.
would you still put yourself in a lower tier? Because
Well,
I think that changes.
Yeah, I think it completely changes things. And I'd never really thought like that. And I think that's a very interesting way to put it. And like, absolutely right. Like, how good would I be if I was played to only fence and went to all 10 World Cup competitions, or international competitions rather, for the past 10 years? I'm sure I'd be like a lot better. My whole life would be different in some way, I'm sure. And even then, if I had gone, I still might not have qualified for the Olympics. Like there are a few people on the circuit who've literally been to every single international competition, but haven't.
I think I noticed the Hungarian team who's excellent, and I think maybe there was someone in that 1 or 2 people that I thought should have been there. They weren't. Overall,
Yes.
I'm a big fan. I love
Yeah.
watching how they fence. The reason I brought attention to this, and basically for the audience, is because competitors are usually very highly strung. We tend to berate ourselves and look, I've done this wrong, I've done that wrong. It takes a coach to point out, look, you do have a lot of good points, value that you contribute to fencing world, and the fact that you manage to compete at that level, Olympic level, with less. And that's something that anyone who's watching this, I like to point out and say, just keep going. If you're at that level, keep going. You're challenging top competitors, and know that they've done a little bit more than you, or a lot more than you, to be there. But if you keep going and sort out maybe sponsorship and other aspects, you could very well be challenging and beating those top guys.
Well, yeah, I suppose I should. Well, I do want to thank you for giving me that perspective shift, because I think in times we as athletes are too hard on ourselves, and we do need someone to be like, hey, like reality check, it's okay, like reframe. It's actually, I mean, I think it's insane. I was the first South African athlete to go to the Olympics since 2008, but not the first to qualify. I was second to qualify. Yeah, that was another whole thing that maybe we can get into later. But yeah, and maybe going back to the meditation stuff you mentioned earlier, I don't think I would have qualified had I not been meditating or had some meditative practice. And I had a contrasting experience to where you say the breath work links you to those moments and those experiences that you have, so that you can get more out of them. Whereas in the time for the my qualification event, I needed to disconnect, because I had this storm of feelings going on of like, okay, I've made it to the final. Yeah, I had to wait. I finished my semi-final at 12 that I just barely won, because I made a lot of tactical mistakes, and so I was like about to throw up from that. And you could see me on the camera. I literally look up. I'm like, oh my god. And yeah, I had to like bring myself back together, recover from that, and then deal with all the like, oh my god, one more bout, it's in 4 hours. What the fuck do I do with myself? Pardon my my French. Maybe you should cut that out. But like, what do I do with myself? And well, I sat and I meditated, and it literally gave me just a huge sense of clarity of like, yes, I'm feeling all these things, but it's as if I went through a thickness of clouds and into the sky where everything was warm and calm, and I could reset myself into being like, okay, cool, I know I'm feeling those things, but I don't need to feel them right now. Like, I need to focus on this thing. And I had that beautiful sense of clarity that helped me win.
So just to reformat my words and put them in a very specific format here, meditation and breathing exercises are there to balance things off. I was specifically mentioning connecting to the feelings when you're watching yourself on a TV, and trying to connect to the experiences that you were feeling at the time, and understanding what you're going through. But just to mention again, when you are in a bout and you're feeling that feeling of being completely overwhelmed, that's where the breathing exercises are there to help to bring you a little bit down if you're too hyped up.
Yes, yeah.
Or if you're not enough, bring it up. So it's to balance things off. Harry, is there an Olympic experience, something special that you would like to share that we haven't yet discovered and talked about?
Yeah, I think the whole experience for me was just a series of is like a movie or a bunch of movies. I mean, like, the opening ceremony, being on the Seine on a boat, was amazing, and going through all the just that opening ceremony was stunning. Then training leading up to my fencing, great. And then after my fencing, I had left the village after a couple of days and had went with my brother and his girlfriend to the south of France, which was cool. And we had some really good experiences there. But yeah, I couldn't shake like the underlying, I suppose it was disappointment, for lack of better description. But after the Olympics and after I'd come back, obviously after such a huge event, you kind of feel a little low, a little down. And yeah, I'd battled with that for a few weeks or months. And yeah, I'm still sort of like, I just feel weird about the experience, because obviously there was such amazing parts to it, and just like a bit of like, at the end, like, oh, that was a little disappointing. But yeah, but like now, having gone through that, I'm glad that I could, come back to training, train more, and still enjoy it a lot. And also I'm doing my masters, and I think having those things to focus on, it's very helpful to just be like, hey, look, it's just another event. Yes, it's the Olympics. It's not the end of your life. It's the beginning of, it's the new beginning. And to continue and to aim for the next one is awesome.
Here's an interesting thing, and we touched on that after you came back from Olympics and you had a series of competitions here locally. And I think from maybe a perspective of someone who is just complete novice or outsider and wants to become better at fencing, if that's their sport, you might think, okay, I was at the Olympics and I'm the man and I rule the roost. But that carries its set of difficulties, as we spoke about, because now that you've had that experience, other guys are hungry. They think, I want to take out this guy. I want to be him. So they're putting on the pressure, and you've experienced that. And how do you cope with that? Now, the pressure, all eyes are on you. You've been to the Olympics. You have that experience. It should make you feel like you guys are nothing, and I'm the man. And meanwhile, they're putting pressure on and saying, no, you will see now.
Well, like, first of all, I love the pressure. And I love it when it's high stakes and there's people watching, and like it just feeds my it just feeds me in energetically. And yeah, when I'd come back and I was feeling low and I'd like done a local competition, I wasn't feeling as like determined to win. I was kind of like, well, why am I doing this? And that's obviously a space or a weak space for people to step in and be like, oh, well, if he doesn't care, I do, and I still want to take him down, and you take the spot. And I don't think, well, maybe it did amplify after I'd been to the Olympics, but I had been at the front of the South African ranking for a while. But yeah, I think the fact that I didn't immediately get back in with the same determination and focus that I had before, that completely was detrimental. Obviously, like I lost a couple of bouts and like I was finding it difficult to try and care again. And luckily, like now I'm caring more. And yeah, you were saying like, oh, they're putting on the pressure. And like for me, the difficulty was I couldn't create enough of my own internal pressure to really care and like dig in and sink my teeth into a fight. And once I started to regain some momentum, it pushed me in the wrong direction. I was, forcing things too hard, choosing the wrong moments, and trying to like absolutely dominate instead of being patient and cunning as you should be in fencing.
Baiting, allowing them in.
Well, creating. And my biggest issue recently has just been like you're not meant to force when a moment comes. You're meant to create that moment. And when you try and force it, you're doing, as I said earlier, you do everything wrong. And when you would start to create it, you know when the timing comes, and so you can execute it and win the point beautifully.
My opinion on when we spoke about this little hiccup as you came back and they're turning up the competition and they want to take you out, was like, well, thumbs up, because it raises the general level. Because if everyone is subdued and thinking, okay, or just going through the paces, I know I need to win, but now there is an Olympian and the guys competing are going like, well, that's an extra incentive, because if I beat an Olympian, I can go around and say, well, I beat him.
Yeah.
I should be in the Olympics. So it raises that general level of competitiveness within the country.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very good thing. That's
completely. I mean, I think that was part of why I was a little demotivated, in the sense of like, oh, I'm back fencing my South Africans and not, the world's greatest. And I think, I shouldn't have been thinking that. It's a privilege to be able to fence and to be able to do your sport, and any opponent that you underestimate is lethal. And that, like, at the end of the day, you both have a sword in your hands, and even someone who's completely untrained can accidentally kill you. So you do have to treat weapons with respect.
beginner's luck.
Well, like you trip on your own shoelaces and you're like, oh, I've done this before, I'm sure I'm okay. And the guy goes, oh my God, what's that? And you're dead. Or rather, you lose a point in this context, luckily. Yeah.
What's next for you, Harry? What are your sights on?
So currently, I'm training towards the University Games, which will be held in Germany this year. So it's, the FISU University Games. And I'll be a part of a South African team, which is awesome, and we'll be doing just épée this time. Last time we did épée and foil, and then after that we'll be doing the World Championships in Georgia, in Tbilisi.
Are you still setting your sights on Olympics for
Absolutely.
LA?
Yes, yeah. And we're in the next cycle, and that's the next step. I am also working on my career as not a fencer, as an engineer, and trying to set up funding in some sense so that I can allow myself to keep fencing for as long as possible, and looking for sponsors in the meantime as well.
How are you managing to balance, now you're finishing your master's degree in engineering and mechanical engineering, and going to start working? Well, I think you're already doing some work. How are you managing to balance that off with highly competitive fencing career?
Well, it's been a bit of a difficult shift, but I've started waking up earlier. So before I go to work and start work at about 9, I would do a run or do some stretching or do like a small strength training session, like our stretch and strengthen sessions that we do. And because fencing only happens in the evening, I usually just go and fence in the evening. So it's like wake up, do a run or a stretch, go to work 9 to 5 or 4, and then go to fencing. And fencing's like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and then Wednesday, Friday we do strength training in the evenings. And
anything you want to say in closing that we didn't cover?
I mean, I guess we could talk for hours and hours.
We always do, actually.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be harder to qualify for the next Olympics, and not just because like the people will be better and more people want it, but the fact that I've shown that I can do it, that obviously other people will want it more, and I'm very excited to not just have to fight them for the right, but also fight with them for maybe even a team to go to the next Olympics.
Okay. And just a final note from myself. Yes, Olympians or anyone who's working towards Olympic status does need a sponsorship. So we're calling to all companies out there and saying, please help and sponsor Harry Saner. It's going to a good cause. It's elevating our fencing sport in South Africa, and it's raising general levels of competitiveness with the fencers. So anyone who's watching this interview, this chat, please say hi to us or let us know, and we'll get in touch with you.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Harry.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Good luck with all your future endeavors.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you continuously. So yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, cool.